Hello everyone and welcome to Auditing and Assurance Learning session. In today's class, we're going to study the causes of frauds and fraud triangle. Causes of fraud and fraud triangle. Now, fraud, just as we've been discussing, is a complex matter with various contributing factors. And the fraud triangle is a model that we use to understand the underlying causes of fraudulent behavior. So the fraud triangle is a model that helps us to understand why individuals engage in fraud. It identifies three elements that must be present for fraud to occur. Fraud triangle. Fraud triangle identifies three elements. All right? Three elements that must be present for fraud to occur. Fraud triangle identifies three elements that must be present for fraud to occur. Three elements. We all know that a triangle has three sides. So the fraud triangle identifies three elements that must be present for fraud to occur. And the first element is pressure or incentive. Incentive or pressure. Pressure to commit fraud. The incentive. That refers to the motivation. It refers to the reason that someone may have to commit fraud. Pressure or incentive refers to the motivation behind fraud, the reason behind fraud, the reason for someone to commit fraud. That's what we are referring to as the incentive. Before someone decides to steal money from a company, before one decides to steal stock from where he works, before someone decides to take money received from debtors, there must be a reason. There must be a motivation behind that act. And that's what we are calling pressure to commit fraud. And it can be financial pressure, such as personal debts. It could be just greed, the individuals in this world who are very greedy, or just a desire for lavish lifestyle. If one has a desire for lavish lifestyle, but one does not have the money, then that can pressurize. That can be the reason why someone may commit fraud. You understand? It could be job dissatisfaction. An individual is not satisfied with his or her work. She or she may decide just to engage in fraudulent activities. So it can be financial pressure, or it can also be non-financial pressure. Non-financial pressure, such as pressure to meet performance targets, job dissatisfaction, or just a sense of entitlement. One may steal money from the company because he feels that he is entitled to have such money or to commit fraud. So incentive or pressure is the first side of this triangle. We've said that fraud triangle is a model that we use to understand the underlying causes of fraudulent behavior. And it identifies 3 elements that must be present for fraud to occur. Incentive, and we've said this incentive could be, or pressure could be, financial or non-financial. Financial pressure. Financial pressure. One has personal debts. One has not paid rent. One has debts, personal debts. One borrowed money to buy clothes, to buy shoes, to pay fees, to buy beer. Okay? So one may have such debts which may now pressurize the person to engage in fraudulent behavior or activities. One may be greedy. These are personal debts. Greed. A greedy person is one who is never satisfied. Right? It's not satisfied with his salary or her salary. So he, beyond being paid, the individual engages in fraudulent activity. That greed can be a motive behind fraudulent behavior. Then we've identified non-financial pressure or motivations. Pressure to meet performance targets, job dissatisfaction, and so on. So this is the first side to this triangle. The second side to the fraud triangle is what we call opportunity. Opportunity must be present for fraud to occur. Now, this refers to the circumstances that may allow someone to commit fraud, and not just committing fraud, but committing fraud and concealing it. So an opportunity is a circumstance. It is a situation that allows someone to commit fraud and then conceal, hide the fact that he or she has committed fraud. And that could include weak internal controls. That could include an opportunity can also arise because of lack of oversight. An opportunity can arise for someone to commit fraud due to lack of segregation of duties. You recall the type of fraud we called teaming and larding, which occurs when there is no segregation of duties or tasks within an organization. The employee who receives money is the one who also records the receipts. So that is an opportunity to commit fraud. That is known as teaming and larding. Another opportunity can arise just because one has access to sensitive information or assets. We've had many instances of accountants committing fraud, stealing money from where they work because they have access to the safe. They have access to the checkbooks. Sensitive information. Having access to sensitive information can provide an opportunity for one to engage in fraudulent activities, opportunities to commit fraud. I've given examples. Weak internal controls. Weak internal controls provide an opportunity for employees to defraud the company. Weak internal controls. Lack of oversight. Right now in Kenya, citizens are fighting the government. Citizens are accusing the government for acts of corruption, fraud. And they are at the same time accusing Parliament for failing to provide adequate oversight. So that means that if there is no oversight, if the government is not under oversight of the parliament, then it provides the government or the executive the opportunity to commit fraud. So where there is no oversight, then that's an opportunity to commit fraud. Lack of oversight. I've given another example: inadequate segregation of duties or tasks. Where one employee is in charge of a wide range of duties, then that gives such an employee an opportunity to engage in fraud. Inadequate segregation of duties is an opportunity to commit fraud. There's also access to sensitive access to sensitive information, or assets can provide one with opportunities for fraud. So for fraud to occur, we've said that there must be three elements that have to exist. One is incentive, the pressure, the motivation, the reason for someone to commit fraud. The second side of this triangle is an opportunity. We've said that opportunity is the circumstance that allows one to engage in fraudulent activities and to conceal it. We've given examples: weak internal control systems, lack of oversight, inadequate segregation of duties, access to sensitive information. Then the third side of this triangle, the fraud triangle, is rationalization. Rationalization. To rationalize. Now, this refers to the mindset of the perpetrator that justifies the fraudulent behavior. The mindset of the perpetrator of fraud that does what? That justifies their fraudulent behavior. Because candidates, everyone knows fraudulent behavior is unacceptable. It's unlawful. It's illegal. It's criminal. But still, individuals engage in fraud. They still commit fraud because they have that mindset that justifies their actions, despite the fact that such actions are unacceptable, are illegal. So that is the third element: rationalization. After succumbing to pressure to commit fraud, after taking advantage of an opportunity or a situation to engage in fraud, then the perpetrator may have that mind that justifies. All right? And it that justifies the fraudulent behavior. Okay? And it involves finding excuses or reasons to convince themselves that the fraud is acceptable or necessary. So rationalizations, these are reasons, these are excuses. Reasons, excuses, justifications to convince themselves, okay, to convince themselves that the behavior they are engaged in is acceptable. Because everyone knows stealing is not allowed, stealing is punishable, stealing is unacceptable, stealing is a criminal offense, but individuals still engage in because of this element. And that can include a belief that they are, for example, underpaid, e.g., reasons like underpaid, they have this excuse or this reason that they can steal from the company because they are underpaid. You understand? They are underpaid. Or they may believe that the company owes them something. The company owes them something. If an individual believes that the company owes them something, then that can be a reason to engage in fraudulent behavior. There are those who may just have the reason that they will pay the money back later. Okay? Or they will pay the money back later. Like what happens in teaming and lading. The clerk or the accountant receives money from debtors, pockets the money, then he or she rationalizes by saying that when I get paid at the end of the month, I'll refund the money. Come end month, the accountant fails to refund the money, but uses money from another source, maybe another debtor has paid, he uses the money paid by debtor B to record in the account of debtor A. So, but initially, when the accountant was taking the money, the reason, the excuse was that I will repay the money when I get my salary at the end of the month. That is rationalization. Because candidates, even if you will pay the money at the end of the month, taking the money without authorization, that is unacceptable. So for fraud to occur, there must exist these three elements: incentive, opportunity or circumstance, and rationalization. In third world countries, politicians or those in power have been accused of corruption. And the civil servants, for example, in Kenya, there have been reports that there is rampant corruption in offices, public offices. And if you talk to most of the civil servants, most of them rationalize corruption by saying that hiyo ni mali ya umma. Okay, there's that belief that public resources can be stolen and people do not have any guilt conscience about doing it, because it's that belief that it's okay to steal public resources. That's why we have individuals who grab land, individuals who grab money meant for medicine, individuals, they steal fertilizer meant for the public and they sell stones in place of the fertilizers, and they do not feel any guilt about it, because there is that belief or rationalization that public resources are for everyone and everyone who gets an opportunity can steal and everyone feels okay about it. So there are many excuses why people engage in fraud. Okay, and there are many reasons that people have for engaging in fraud. You understand? So candidates, consider a scenario. I want you to consider a scenario where an employee is facing financial difficulties due to mounting debt. So that is pressure. Okay? That explains the first element, pressure. One is having debt, mounting debt. And they work in an accounting department and have access to the company's bank accounts. Now that one is an opportunity. Having access to bank account, that gives this accountant an opportunity to commit fraud. So they work in the accounting department and they have access to companies' bank accounts. That's an opportunity. But before that, they have mounting debt. Maybe they have not paid rent, or they are gamblers. You see, there are people who gamble and they get into debt, or they what we call these people, life feast. Give an example of a life feast, one who keeps on spending every time on things that are not basic, all right? Lavish lifestyle, forcing people to get into debt. That is pressure. Giving examples. So there's a scenario of an accountant who is having massive debts, personal debts. Then this accountant works in an accounting department and he has or she has access to the bank accounts. So that provides an opportunity. And they convince themselves that they'll pay the money back when their financial position improves or situation improves. And they also convince themselves that the company won't even notice the missing funds. See, that is now rationalization. Because they are the ones in charge of these bank accounts, they convince themselves that even if they stole the money, the company will not notice. So do you understand that scenario? So there is incentive, there is opportunity, then excuses or reasons. And in that scenario, candidates, all the elements of the fraud triangle are present, which creates a high risk of fraud. And you can think of any other scenario where fraud has occurred. Think of any scenario where fraud has occurred, be it in public office or even private office. Try to analyze that scenario and you'll find that there were these three elements: the incentive, the opportunity, and rationalization. That is the fraud triangle. We said at the beginning that the fraud triangle is a model that we use to understand the underlying causes of fraudulent behavior, and we say that it identifies three elements that must be present for fraud to occur. One, incentive. Two, opportunity. And three, rationalization. Now, candidates, apart from the factors that we discussed in the fraud triangle, there are other additional factors contributing to fraud. There are other additional factors which I want us to mention briefly before we close the lesson. Additional factors. Additional factors. Additional factors contributing to fraud. Now, while the fraud triangle provides a useful framework, it's important to note that there are other factors that can also contribute to fraudulent behavior. And one obvious factor is organizational culture. Organizational culture. That is a culture that prioritizes results over ethics. A culture that says the end justifies the means. So it does not matter the process. What matters is the end, the result. Such a culture can contribute to fraudulent behavior in an organization. A culture that prioritizes performance or results or profits over ethics. A culture that tolerates unethical behavior. A culture that lacks transparency can foster an environment where fraud is more likely to occur. We have organizations that do not have any positive culture. Starting from the management at the top, you find a company that has managers who have no manners, managers who have unethical behavior, managers who lack integrity, managers who are not honest, managers with strange illegal activities, managers who are known to be thugs, who violate the law, who violate company policies. So they set the wrong tone at the top. When you have such management at the top, then such management, just by their very example, they set a negative, unethical culture at the top, which trickles down to the rest of the workers. So when you have such a culture, that culture fosters an environment where fraud is more likely to occur. But if you have a manager with high level of integrity, if you have a manager who is honest, a manager who adheres to professional ethics, then such a manager, through behavior, his behavior or her behavior, sets a different ethical tone at the top. And in such an organization, the likelihood of fraud occurring is minimal, because such managers set positive organizational culture. Do you understand? Yes. Organizational culture is an additional factor that contributes to fraud. The second factor contributing to fraud is lack of ethical leadership. Lack of ethical leadership. When leadership fails to set a good example, or when leadership turns a blind eye to unethical behavior, it sends a message that fraud is acceptable. And it's related to just culture. When the leaders are unethical through their behavior, they are sending the message that unethical behavior is tolerated, and fraud is one such unethical behavior. There could also be personal factors contributing to fraud. Personal factors. Personal factors. Personal factors. Now, individual traits like low integrity, a sense of entitlement, or disregard for rules can also increase the propensity for fraudulent behavior, personal traits of individuals. One who feels entitled can engage in unethical, fraudulent activities. There are also conditions like economic conditions, like economic downturns, like financial hardships, can also create pressure and desperation, leading some individuals to resort to fraud. When the economy is going through recession, where individuals have limited resources, people can engage in fraud in order to make their ends meet, in order to meet their basic needs like food, shelter, health, and so on. Because there are some basic needs. If one has no food at all, one has no food for himself, for the family, and all that, then that can exert pressure on individuals to do what? To engage in fraudulent behavior. Then there are many factors, but let me just mention the last one: technological advancements. Technological advancements. Now, technology can create new opportunities for fraud, such as cybercrime, such as identity theft, and so on. And I hope you even come across individuals who are just using the phone to engage in fraud, calling people, telling people that I've sent money wrongly on your number. That money was meant for my mother who is hospitalized at Kenyatta Hospital. Kindly send me back the money. We have such individuals are taking advantage of technology, the mobile technology. So there are many other additional factors, but we will stop at that. We've, in our today's lesson, studied the causes of fraud and fraud triangle. The main aspect of this lesson is the fraud triangle. Now, here is your today's assignment. Number one, what are the three elements of the fraud triangle and how do they intersect or interact to create fraud risk? Two, describe two common pressures that might motivate an employee to commit fraud. Three, explain how weak internal controls create opportunities for fraud to occur. Four, provide two examples of how someone might rationalize their fraudulent behavior. Five, beyond the fraud triangle, what other factors can contribute to the occurrence of fraud? In our next session, we will analyze the indicators of errors and fraud. Bye.